Okay, we need to talk about Myth Wukong. Over on Steam, the game has broken the concurrent player record and peaked at 2,223,179 players. I mean, that's just absolutely insane when you think about that. The last game I saw get this much hype was Palworld, and does anybody even remember that game?
I am just a figment of your imagination.
I kind of feel like Myth Wukong is gonna follow in Palworld's footsteps, if I'm being completely honest. So, listen, I know this may get me a lot of hate, guys, but I've just finished Chapter 1 of Myth Wukong, and I have to say, this game isn't anywhere close to Game of the Year. In fact, Game of the Year and the name of this game don't really belong in the same sentence, and by the end of this video, you're gonna know exactly why that is.
What?
Okay,
Give it
whoa,
back.
whoa, whoa, whoa. It's not like I'm calling the game bad, okay? Just chill out, all right? This guy's a woke channel. Now, that's not to say that Wukong is a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think this game is being blown out of proportion in terms of hype. Especially when we consider the concurrent player count on Steam breaking records. I feel like one of the biggest reasons this game is even on everybody's mouths to begin with is because of the controversy surrounding it that doesn't even have anything to do with the game itself. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to get involved around any of that stuff or talk about it. Save that for some other YouTube channels. Woke, not woke, I don't really give a shit about any of that. Okay, at the end of the day, is the game any good? The developers Game Science don't really have the greatest track record when it comes to developing video games. The only game they developed in the past before Wukong amounted to a singular mobile game. Art of War Red Tides was their singular release before Myth Wukong, which has turned out to be one of the biggest releases of 2024, so you can imagine the pressure here to actually deliver on what was promised by the gameplay trailers. In fact, when you search up Art of War Red Tides on Steam, you can even see that it's still in early access, even though the release date was almost 10 years ago now. At least the Steam reviews are mostly positive though. So, how Myth Wukong wasn't an absolute train wreck is a bit of a miracle to me. It has a combat system that feels decent, bosses that have different, interesting-looking designs, and even a few interesting mechanics here and there to mix things up with the bosses to keep the mechanics fresh. Like this one boss that has a mechanic where he becomes invulnerable and can heal if you let his little minions get too close. Not gonna lie, I thought that was a cool switch up. That being said, while the game isn't a complete train wreck, it's also not anywhere near what I would call good. Average, maybe even slightly above average if I wanted to be generous is where I would put the game if you compare it to pretty much anything else in the industry. First, let's talk about the exploration, or the lack thereof. At the end of the day, Myth Wukong doesn't really have anything to offer outside of its bosses. If you've ever played Cuphead, it's basically exactly that. A boss rush game where you just keep fighting boss after boss after boss until you reach the end. Yes, there are a few sections in between bosses that you have to travel between to reach them, but they're boring, lifeless, and filled with enemies that you just mash the attack button to beat. Basically, just padding to make the game feel longer than it should, and I'm not really a fan of that. The highlight of this game are the boss fights, plain and simple. At least the environments look pretty good though. Well, not on my rig anyway. PC performance has been kind of a miss for me.
Fucking shit, fuck me in the ass. Fuck you fucking stupid cunt. Monkey licking fuck that.
But I will admit my rig isn't the greatest. A 2070 Super with an i7 10700K, and I was trying to stream the game as well as play it, so it's probably just a me problem. Plenty of my viewers were playing on the PS5 and had no issues, so whoo, PC gaming, am I right? Also, where the hell is the map? Given how everything kind of looks similar within the environments, a map would have been nice, as it was a bit too easy to get lost among a few branching paths here and there, and apparently it only gets worse the further in the game you get, with many hidden areas and secrets. And you know, as cool as that sounds, I really would have liked a map. Granted, the original Dark Souls didn't have a map either, and I love the game for that, but at least in Dark Souls, every area connected together with one another seamlessly, and if you got lost for a while, you'd eventually end up in a place you recognized. And I cannot say that the same is true for Myth Wukong. Either way, it is what it is. Hey, some of you may even view no map as a plus, but I thought it at least deserved mentioning. As for the story, I know the story's based off Journey to the West, but personally, I judge the game as a standalone medium. Is the game able to convey the story to me in a digestible manner without using any outside resources? And if the answer is no, then generally I'm not really a fan. And Black Myth Wukong definitely expects you to have some in-depth knowledge of Journey to the West. If that's a bad thing in your eyes, hey, that's up to you. If you're just there for the bosses though, this probably won't even be an issue for you, and at the end of the day, those are definitely the main attraction here. Now excuse me while I go read the in-depth lore of Sun Wukong, thank you. Let's talk a bit more about the boss fights. While I do think the amount of boss fights on display here is pretty cool, and each of them are unique in their designs and are spectacles to fight, I have to say, in terms of the actual combat, the fights all play out very similarly. Outside of that one fight where the boss had a healing phase, I basically just mash light attack to hopefully complete my combo to stun the boss, which builds up my focus points so then I can unleash my heavy attack, maybe throw in the immobilize spell after that for some wombo combo, and just rinse and repeat. The first time you go through that cycle, it's a pretty cool feeling, but once all the boss fights in Chapter 1 start playing out in a very similar manner, the combat becomes tiresome very quickly. I understand the combat is still opening up in Chapter 1, and I've only unlocked 3 out of the 4 abilities you have in the game's intro, but the foundation of the combat doesn't even feel good. Sometimes you'll feel like you should have dodged an attack that hit you, or an attack that should have hit, whiffed. What? There's a perfect dodge in the game that doesn't actually reward you with anything other than a cool-looking animation. Take a game like Sekiro, where you're rewarded with perfect parrying the boss to build up their gauge until you can go for a death blow. In Wukong, perfect dodging does absolutely nothing. Dodging normally does the exact same thing as a perfect dodge, it just dodges the incoming attack. The perfect dodge doesn't slow the boss down so you can get some extra hits in, it doesn't build up their stagger gauge, nah, it does nothing. You know, I actually played the Final Fantasy XVI demo right after Wukong last night, and I was reminded of what a good combat system actually feels like. Perfect dodging is rewarding because you can dish out a counter that deals heavy damage, which contributes to their stagger gauge melting like butter so you can go in on the boss even harder. Ugh. It's mechanics like these where the developers kind of show their inexperience. So while on the surface everything looks flashy and cool, the more you play Wukong, the more you begin to realize the combat just has the depth of a puddle. Now, I could just be the odd one out here, but those are my impressions so far about Black Myth Wukong. I think the hype is way overblown because, by all intents and purposes, this game should have failed, and I'm very surprised by what the developers have been able to come up with here, and so is everyone else, I think. Hence why people want to give it Game of the Year. When you think about their track record being one mobile game, I have to say, what they've come up with is certainly spectacular, but when you compare it to the likes of something like Sekiro, Final Fantasy XVI, or any other game with action combat, the game just doesn't compare. And to say that this is Game of the Year material, to me, is pretty wild. Again, that doesn't make it a bad game by any stretch of the imagination, and there are still things that Black Myth Wukong does right. That intro, for instance, whoo boy, that intro had my jaw to the floor with how cool that was to watch play out. It was like, it was on some Asura's Wrath shit for sure. It was awesome. But overall, is the game worth a full 60 bones? To me, absolutely not. If I could get a refund for the game, I would've. With that being said, would this game be worth getting on a sale? Maybe. Personally, I wouldn't pay more than half price for Black Myth Wukong, simply because there are so many other games out there that do what it tries to do 10 times better, but at the end of the day, that's just me. I want to hear what you guys' impressions are for Black Myth Wukong down in the comments below. Are you enjoying it? Are you hating it? Or are you somewhere in the middle like me? Let me know, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel, baby, because I'll probably be continuing live streams of Wukong for you guys right here on the channel. I typically stream in the evenings around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so be sure to join in the streams with us. I can assure you they are a ton of fun. Oh my. A huge thank you to Parks, Adam, Newhouse, Jared Van Vlake, Nerve, and Jared for being a part of the business. I appreciate you guys so much. With that being said, don't forget to take care of business, and I'll catch you guys all in the next one.